So welcome everyone to our webinar, Understanding the College, CASLPO Registration and Mentorship. So we just have a few housekeeping items that we'd like to start with. Please close all other running applications to help maintain a stable audio and video connection. If your connection freezes, please exit GoToWebinar and then return to the session. The video and slides for this presentation will be posted on CASLPO's website on the International and Non-Accredited Canadian Programs page within the next few weeks. The agenda will include a 5-minute bio break before we start the mentorship section of our presentation. You may enter questions in the questions section of GoToWebinar at any time during the presentation. We will answer questions at the end of the section about registration with CASLPO and again after the section about mentorship. If we don't have time to answer all the questions that we received during this presentation, we will answer those questions to the webinar participants following the webinar. We have prepared a few handouts for you, and they can be found under the questions section in the menu on the right. So before we start our presentation, I'd like to do a land acknowledgement. So we acknowledge the lands upon which we meet today as traditional territories of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. We acknowledge that Toronto, a Mohawk word for the land where trees stand in the water, is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. These lands are now home to many diverse Indigenous people and communities. We are thankful to the peoples who have since time immemorial cared for Turtle Island, which includes the land we now call Ontario. Acknowledging these traditional Indigenous territories is one way for us to recognize the rights and history of the Indigenous people. It is also a small way for us to work towards dismantling the continued impacts of colonialism and recognize the calls to action for truth and reconciliation. We are all members who share the dish with one spoon, which teaches us to live on these lands with respect, nonviolence, and sustainability. So our presentation, I am Colleen Myrie, and I am the Director of Registration Services here at the college. I guess Jennifer?
Yes, so my name is Jennifer Cubitt. I am the Research, Data, and Policy Analyst at CASLPO.
And my name is Caitlin Reed. I'm the Speech Language Pathology Practice Advisor and Manager of Mentorship at CASLPO.
Okay, great. So I will be starting, we also have online support and moderators available to help us. We have Sandra Corte, who is our International Applications Coordinator, and Sandra is also a Speech Language Pathology Practice Advisor with CASLPO. Jessica Laforet is our Program Assistant for Registration Services, and Ira Davalos is our Administrative Assistant for Registration. They're helping us offline, so you won't see them during the presentation. So we have 6 parts of our presentation. We will start with the importance of registration and licensure, then go to the importance of good character. We'll talk a little bit about the Canadian Entry to Practice exam, and then we'll talk about becoming a CASLPO registrant and mentorship, and of course we'll have question sections as well. So we start with the importance of registration and licensure, and what is CASLPO? So the importance of registration and licensure, what is the role of the regulatory body? Mainly, our purpose is to protect the public from harm. And we do that by setting minimum requirements for clinicians to ensure safe and competent practice, by establishing and enforcing professional standards for practice and conduct, assuring the quality of practice of the professions and continuing competence of practicing registrants, and also investigating complaints from clients or the public and taking disciplinary action when necessary. So without regulations or registration, the public would be vulnerable to unsafe and incompetent healthcare providers. For many professions in Canada, regulatory bodies are called colleges. A regulatory college is not an academic institution. The College of Audiologists and Speech Language Pathologists of Ontario is the regulatory body for audiologists and speech language pathologists in the province of Ontario. We offer a few services. Of course, registration is one of the main ones. We look at new applications. Also, mentorship is run through the registration team, and also renewal services. We also have a quality assurance team, and they work on self-assessment. There is a self-assessment tool and continuous learning activity credits and peer assessment. There is inquiries, reports, complaints, and discipline process, a professional practice advice team for registrants, and we also do e-forums, webinars, and other communications and public awareness. So what is CASLPO? In Ontario, you must be registered with CASLPO to legally practice audiology and speech language pathology. Before starting to work in these fields in Ontario, you must be registered with CASLPO, and that means that you have to have a CASLPO number. So CASLPO also has a board of directors, and the board of directors is composed of professional registrants of the college, both audiologists and speech language pathologists, registrants from our university programs. We also have community appointees and public members who are appointed by the government. The board of directors' role is to serve the public interest by overseeing the regulation of the practice of speech language pathologists and audiologists in Ontario. So when you're registered with CASLPO, you are joining the company of all other regulated professionals in the province. For example, nurses, teachers, doctors, lawyers, engineers, just to name a few. So there is a difference between being a regulator and a professional association like SAC or ASHA or SPA, just to name a few. The regulator acts in the interest of the public by regulating its registrants, whereas the association acts in the interest of the profession. The regulator registration is based on a legal legislated criteria, where the association accepts members based on the association's criteria. Registration is mandatory, where membership with an association is voluntary. And also, regulator is accountable to the public and government. In Ontario, it's the Ministry of Health. And the association is accountable to its members. We have a full chart of the differences between a regulator, and the professional association. It's available in the handouts that we've provided. One thing about becoming a registered member of CASLPO, it provides an individual with the legal authority to use the professional titles such as audiologist, speech language pathologist, speech therapist, or any abbreviation or variation of these titles in Ontario. And it also provides the individual with the ability to make any representation to the public indicating their qualifications to practice either audiology or speech language pathology in Ontario. The college's document titled Standards Use of Restricted Titles should be reviewed by applicants before applying for registration with the college. And we've included it as one of the handouts with this presentation. This document provides applicants with important information about the accurate use and representation of restricted titles. So during our presentation, we have a few scenarios that we'd like to put to the applicants just to illustrate certain aspects of the college. So our first scenario, Mia has completed her master's degree in speech language pathology at University X and plans to work in Ontario, but she is not a registrant of CASLPO yet. Mia decides to create the following LinkedIn profile. So you can see her profile, Mia Jones. She's a speech language pathologist, and in brackets, she's put pre-registered in Ottawa, Canada area. And in the summary, she puts, I am a pre-registered speech language pathologist based in Canada or Ontario. I have excellent communication skills and pride myself on my ability to develop a rapport with clients and their families. Is this information on Mia's LinkedIn profile acceptable according to college regulations? And we are just going to launch a poll, and you can answer that. We'll give you a few minutes, or seconds actually. All right.
Okay, so the answers were 6% said yes, 81% said no, and 13% said maybe.
All right, thank you so much, Jessica. So actually the answer is no. So according to CASLPO's regulations, Mia can't use the protected title speech language pathologist or any variation like pre-registered SLP. By adding a word to it, you're still using that restricted title, and that's not permitted. CASLPO takes title infringement very seriously. If the college finds that Mia has been using the protected title without being registered, her application will be sent to the registration committee of the college, which will look at her conduct and decide if she is fit to practice. While the registration committee is reviewing Mia's file, Mia will not be able to start practicing as a speech language pathologist until the registration committee has finished the review of her case and made a written decision. It takes between 3 to 6 months for the registration committee to complete their review. it may take even longer for Mia to start practicing in Ontario if the registration committee decides that more work must be completed by Mia before a certificate of registration may be issued to her. So to avoid any possible problems, it's important to follow the rules about using the restricted titles. So please be aware that these rules do not prohibit you from indicating your academic credentials in your resume or LinkedIn. For example, you can use the AUD or Doctor of Audiology, or say that you have a Master's of Health Science in Speech Language Pathology or a Master's of Audiology or Speech Language Pathology as your academic credential. All right, so we are moving to the next section about the importance of good character and what is good character. So we have this word cloud that provides a lot of words associated with good character. Honesty, respect, integrity are just some of the words associated with good character. But CASLPO actually has good character defined within our registration regulation in Section 3. And so this clause in our registration regulation talks about past and present conduct, and we are looking that the applicant does not have any physical or mental condition or disorder that could affect his or her ability to practice the profession in a safe manner. The applicant will practice the profession with decency, integrity, and honesty, and in accordance with the law. And the applicant will display an appropriate professional attitude. So those are all things that we look for in an applicant. So we have a real life scenario that we have taken from the College of Physiotherapists of Ontario. So the College of Physiotherapy have a competency exam that has two components. One is a written exam and the other is a clinical exam, and an applicant must pass both in order to practice as a physiotherapist in Ontario. So the applicant X passed the written portion of the physiotherapy competency exam and also held a provisional practice certificate of registration for a year with the College of Physiotherapists. But applicant X failed the clinical exam for their provisional practice certificate, they failed the clinical exam and their provisional practice certificate expired. So after 2 unsuccessful attempts at the clinical exam, the applicant passed their final try and applied for an independent practice certificate. However, a few months before passing the clinical exam, a patient told the college that applicant X had been holding themselves out as a registered physiotherapist and illegally providing patient care and claiming to be a physiotherapist. Applicant X said that they informed the clinic owner, who was a registered physiotherapist, that they had failed the clinical exam, and the clinic owner then strongly encouraged them to continue working at the clinic as a physiotherapist assistant to gain clinical experience. However, this quickly escalated to applicant X conducting assessments independently, developing treatment plans and goals, and working without informing patients that they were in fact a physiotherapist assistant. And these are all activities that physiotherapist assistants are not legally allowed to do. So the case was reviewed by the College of Physiotherapists Registration Committee, and the committee concluded that the applicant's conduct demonstrated a disregard for the law and the principles of decency, integrity, and honesty that members of the profession are expected to uphold. While the College of Physiotherapists did recognize the power imbalance that sometimes exists between employer and employee, the college concluded that it is always the responsibility of the registered physiotherapists to ensure that they are following the rules. So the college decided to issue an independent practice certificate to applicant X with terms, conditions, and limitations, including meeting with a senior physiotherapist advisor and successfully completing an ethics course. Applicant X was responsible for the associated costs. In addition, an investigation was launched against the clinic owner. So it's important to keep in mind that misconduct before registration may trigger an inquiry into an applicant's suitability to practice. Each application may be assessed by the registration committee on a case-by-case basis. And the committee will want to know the details of the applicant's conduct before a decision can be made about registration with the college. All right, so now we move to talking about the Canadian Entry to Practice exam. So Speech, Language and Audiology Canada administers the Canadian Entry to Practice exam for audiology and speech language pathology. So please contact SAC if you have questions about exam dates, the cost of the exam, exam enrollment periods, the process for enrollment, testing accommodations, writing the exam, preparing for the exam, and study resources. All of that information is available on SAC's website as opposed to CASLPO's website. CASLPO does have a exam section of our website, but we mostly talk about eligibility to write the exam on our page. So before you write the CETP exam, the Canadian Entry to Practice exam, you must confirm your exam eligibility with CASLPO if you wish to work in Ontario. So to be deemed eligible to write the CETP exam at the next available exam sitting, CASLPO must receive a complete application package from you at least 18 weeks before the exam date. So you may enroll for the CETP exam before being deemed eligible for registration. However, and if after assessing your application you are eligible to take the CETP exam, CASLPO will inform SAC, and if you have registered for the next available exam date, you will be permitted to take the exam. However, on the other hand, if you do not apply in time for your application to be reviewed by CASLPO for the next available exam sitting, or if your application has deficiencies or if it's incomplete, you will not be allowed to take the exam if you have registered for the exam before being deemed eligible. So just take note of that. All right, so we are moving on to our next section, becoming a CASLPO registrant, and I'm handing things over to Jennifer.
Okay, my keyboard is working. Oops, no, it's not. That's the wrong section. Bear with me, please. I'm just going to scroll through some slides. I clicked on the wrong section. This is a section you already know. Here we go. Okay, let's go to becoming a CASLPO registrant. So I am going to take you through the application process and the registration process. I'll just let you know I'm going to give you a lot of details in this section. don't worry about the details. You don't need to write down the details. These slides and the presentation will both be posted on our website. So better to listen to what I say. And if you have any questions, note those down, and you can ask them either at the end of this section, or you can send us an email. But I will give you a lot of details because I'm going to get into the nitty-gritty of applying and all the forms. But just hopefully we will answer all of your questions. So to start, the application requirements for registration with CASLPO, you must have completed a professional master's degree in audiology or speech pathology, depending on which certificate you're applying for. You must have fulfilled our academic requirements, and this includes coursework and clinical practicum content and hours. There's the other requirements are the good character that Colleen just spoke about. A language proficiency standard must be met. Eligibility to work in Canada must be demonstrated. And if you're applying for a general certificate, you must demonstrate currency, which is recent professional practice. So I'll go into all of these in more detail. So the application process, where do you start? There are three main processes of the application, or three main steps of the application process. The first step, you submit the documents, the required documents to us, and you do this both to have your eligibility for CASLPO registration determined, and as Colleen mentioned, it will also be for so that your eligibility to enroll in the CETP exam can be determined. So you submit the documents. Once we've received your application form, we create a file for you, and you will hear from us within 15 days, and we'll let you know about any outstanding documents that you must still submit if it's applicable. Once we've received all of your documents, we will put your application in the queue for review, and you will receive from us an email that says your application is ready for review. So then it's in the queue, and the next step is the registration eligibility review by CASLPO staff, and that will be complete within up to 12 weeks, and that's from the date that you received the ready for review email. So if after the review it's deemed that you're eligible, then you may enroll for the CETP exam with SAC, and you may register with CASLPO with proof of either an exam enrollment, which we call an undertaking, or you can show us a successful CETP exam result. As well, if you're getting an initial certificate, you'll need to show an offer of employment and a mentor, and I'll talk a bit more about this last bit. Okay, so starting the submission process. After you've completed a professional master's degree, which is a clinical master's degree in audiology or speech pathology, these are the documents that you need to submit to us. So here's a list, and I'm going to go through them in detail. There's the application form for international, for applicants from international or non-accredited Canadian programs. There's the application fee. There's the official transcripts from both your graduate and undergraduate programs. There's the academic credential assessment report, and that is required for each degree that's completed outside of Canada. There is the coursework requirements form that is in our application guide that must be completed. And then there is a summary of clinical practicum hours form that must be signed by your program director. We ask for a syllabus for each course that you've listed on the coursework requirements form. And if it's applicable, we need to see verification of registration forms filled for places you have worked already, for jurisdictions in which you have worked. And again, if applicable, you need to show evidence of English or French proficiency. And before I get into the fine details, I will let you know that there is a big change coming to our application process. It's an exciting one. This spring, we're going to be launching our application portal. So when the portal is launched, the application process, which now is done more with paper and pen or typing, the application process will then happen through the CASLPO website, and that will include uploading of all the documents that you're submitting, excluding those that have to be submitted by a third party, like your university. We will provide information about the portal launch as it becomes available, so that will be on our website. And so right now the information I'm providing is about the current application process, but the details that I'm providing, other than the way you're going to submit things, really are relevant to the new process that will happen this spring. So everything I'm going to tell you is important and relevant for now and for later. Okay, and I'll start with a frequently asked question that we get about bachelor's degree in speech pathology, say, and the question is, I've completed a professional bachelor's degree in speech language pathology, and it allows me to work as a speech language pathologist in my country. Can I be registered in Ontario? And the answer to this is no. CASLPO's registration regulation states that a minimum non-exemptable requirement is the completion of a professional master's degree in speech pathology or audiology. Because it is non-exemptable in the regulation, CASLPO staff and the registration committee have no discretion on this requirement. So you have to have a professional professional master's degree in speech pathology or audiology to apply for registration. Okay, so now I'm going to take you through details about the documents to be submitted. To start, you want to get all the information about the application and information about registration. So you go to our website, which is CASLPO.com, CASLPO.com. And then if you'll get the main page and you'll see applicants on that top bar. So if you hover your mouse over applicants, the drop-down menu will come, and you see to the left, highlighted in red, is international and non-accredited Canadian programs. If you click on that, that will bring you to this page, which is Path 2, Applicants from International and Non-Accredited Canadian Programs. So you get on this page, and if you scroll down, you see highlighted in red a little button that says Download Application, and click on that, and the application form and the application guide with all the information will pop up. Okay, the second thing to submit for the application is the application fee of $150, and there's information about how to submit that in the application form. Okay, we need official transcripts from your graduate and undergraduate programs to be submitted, and we require an official transcript to be sent to us directly from the university. We do accept password protected official e-transcripts as long as your university provides them. We also require an academic credential assessment report for each degree that you've obtained outside of Canada. And as indicated in our application guide, there are 3 organizations that provide this. There's West Canada, IQOS, and University of Toronto CES. So it's up to you which organization you want to use. We require the original, which the organization often sends to us. And I'll make a note that if you submit a credential assessment from West Canada, you do not need to submit additional transcripts to us, because West will verify the transcript and send us a version confirming that it is an original. Oops. Okay. Number 5 is a completed coursework requirements form, and I'll talk in more detail about this form. Essentially, this form shows us, it's broken down the coursework requirements, the different sections of coursework that we need to see that has been completed. So there are 4 coursework areas of study and 5 sections on this form. So I'm going to take you through them. And again, once we get to the online portal, this will be the same form, but it will be online version instead of a paper version. So even if you have the paper version filled out, that will help you fill out the portal. Okay, so here's what the coursework requirement forms looks like. And this is the first page, which is section 1, called Basic Knowledge Specific to the Profession. There are 2 subsections on this section, and they do differ for depending if you're an audiology or a speech pathology applicant. So the first subsection is, and I've got examples of courses on the right side that might fit into these sections. And again, these slides will be on the website. So if you want to refer back to this, you can see what courses fit in which subsections. So the first subsection, one course is required in either human anatomy, human physiology, anatomy and physiology of speech mechanisms. One course is required there. And then if you're an applicant for speech pathology, you require 2 courses in functional linguistics area. So introduction to linguistics, phonetics, semantics, psycholinguistics, those are all courses that could fit in this subsection. If you are an applicant for audiology, essentially we require 2 courses either in acoustics or hearing science, psychoacoustics. Those are type of courses that fit in that subsection. Overall, in this section, we require a minimum of 135 coursework hours. And I'll talk briefly about coursework hour calculations in a minute. Section 2, the coursework form, is basic knowledge related to other professions. There are 3 subsections, and they're the same for audiology and speech pathology applicants. The first subsection is requires at least 1 course in the area of psychological and social aspects of human development. So courses like Intro to Psychology, Abnormal Psychology, Child Development, Sociology, those courses all could fit in that subsection. The second subsection, you need at least 2 courses in the area of statistics or research methods, and those can be from any departments. These are generally from your undergraduate degree, but also master's programs often do offer these courses as well. The third subsection is professional practices and issues or administrative organization of SLP services. These are often courses taken in the master's degree looking at professional issues, professional practice, the ethics of practicing speech pathology. And in this subsection, you need 1 course. And across section 2, you need a minimum of 180 coursework hours. Okay, section 3 is what we call the major professional area. And if you're an applicant in audiology, you're going to put all of your audiology courses in this section. If you're an applicant in speech pathology, you're going to put all your speech pathology courses. And we require a minimum of 405 coursework hours in this section. Section 4 is the minor professional area. And so this is sort of the opposite field, depending on what you're applying for. So if you are applying to have an audiology certificate, this is where you'd put your speech pathology courses. And if you're applying for a speech pathology certificate, you would put your audiology coursework in this section. We require 45 hours of coursework in this section. And then the final section, section 5, is really expanding on section 3, which is the coursework in the major area. In section 3, we've asked for the coursework hours in the major area. How many hours did you do related to audiology, say? And in this section, we're looking at the details of the content areas in your major hour courses. So we need to know that you have completed coursework in each of these areas. It doesn't have to be a full course in each of these areas, but we need to know that there is in-depth study across these areas in your master's program. So for this page, what we require is that you indicate to us the course syllabus where we can find evidence that you've completed coursework in each of these sections. So we have 1 column for the course syllabus, so we know where to look, and then the specific page number where we can find evidence that you learn validation of hearing aids, say, or implantable hearing devices, where that was given in-depth study. And if your syllabus doesn't have specific information showing validation of hearing aids was covered in this course, then you can ask for the professor, and you know you covered that area, you can ask your professor to write a letter for us and send it to us saying validation of hearing aids was covered in this course in this semester. And that can serve as evidence to show that you've completed that coursework area. And I'll show this is the same section for speech pathology applicants. Same thing, we're looking to see that you covered coursework in depth in these, I think, 9 areas, 10 areas. So we need you to submit the course syllabus to show evidence that these content areas were covered. Okay, so that was the coursework form. How do you determine the hours? Generally, a course, let's say a course in the United States, generally semesters are about 14 weeks long. And if you have 3 hours of lecture a week, then it's the simple math of 3 hours times 14 weeks. That's 42 hours of instruction for that course. If your course in Australia, maybe a course is 13 weeks long for a semester, and if you meet for if you have 3 hours of lecture a week, then that's 39 hours for that course. If your course doesn't meet regularly and hours are all over the place, then you may just need to look at the syllabus and count the hours manually and then put that in the form. If you have laboratory hours or problem-based learning hours, you count those up in this, however you can count them, and those are counted, you'll see in the form, those are counted at 30%. So lecture hours and tutorial hours are counted at 100%. We count all of it. And laboratory hours and problem-based learning hours, you total it and then multiply by 30% to get the number of instructional hours. That information, that little second bit, is in the application guide, that explanation. The way you've calculated the information about when the hours are and how many there are should be contained in the syllabus or in your transcript that you provide to CASLPO. So we need to verify that total with your application. If it's not available in your syllabus, then you can provide that information about the number of hours a different way. You can get, example again, you can get a professor from the course to give a letter saying there are this many hours in that course. Okay. The next part of your complete application includes a signed summary of clinical practicum hours form, and your program director or the designate of your audiology speech pathology master's program must sign and verify the form. Photocopies of this are not acceptable. We require the original paper versions. The one exception is we do accept an electronic copy if it comes directly from the university professor's work email address. In that case, we do accept a PDF version. Okay, the 7th part of the complete application, which I've alluded to, is the syllabi. And this is so that we have documentation in our files to confirm that all of our registrants have fulfilled the required content hours, the academic requirements. And so we ask that you provide a syllabus for each course that you took, that you include on your coursework form. Yes. Okay, the 8th part of the complete application is, if applicable, if you have previous professional experience and you worked in a regulated jurisdiction, we require from each jurisdiction a verification of registration or licensure form. Excuse me. And so this is, as Colleen mentioned, from all regulatory bodies. We don't need verification from associations, but for each jurisdiction where you were registered with a regulatory body, either currently or previously, we require that they complete a verification of registration form, and that form is included in our application guide. And finally, if the language of instruction of your professional master's degree was not English or French, you must submit a result from one of the following tests to show that you meet our language proficiency standard. And this information is on our website and also in our application guide. We have 3 English language proficiency tests that are available and 2 French tests that are available. And overall, as I've sort of mentioned, some of the documents must be originals and some may be uploaded by you. So the following documents must be originals sent from the originating institution. These includes university transcripts, the academic credential assessment, the clinical practicum hours form, and the language proficiency test if that is required. Other documents that you're submitting, like your syllabi, your application form, your coursework requirements form, they may be sent electronically in PDF format to our email address, which is registration@caslpo.com, or they may be sent by mail or courier to our new address, which is here. It's 175 Bloor Street East, and it's available on our website to find. And yes, once we get to the portal, this part of the things will change, but we will be clear about that as it comes. Okay, so that's what needs to be submitted. How long does the process take? So first, the first step for us is the intake procedure. Once we receive your excuse me, application form, as I mentioned, we open a file for you. And it takes up to 15 days for us to complete the intake process. And after the 15 days, or no later than the 15 days, you will receive from us an email which tells you which documents we have received and which are outstanding still. So that will give you information about if your university has submitted your transcripts and so on, in addition to the documents that you have submitted. Once we've received all of the required documents, we then send you a ready for review email, and that will let you know that your application is now in the queue for the review process. And just note, the process does take longer if you haven't submitted all the proper documents or if you're missing any documents. It just will take time. Okay, then the review procedure. The review of the application may take up to 12 weeks to complete, and this is from the date of the ready for review email that you receive from us. Your application is reviewed by college staff and to determine if all of the college's registration requirements have been met. And at that point, if you are eligible, then you may register with CASLPO, and you may also enroll in the CETP exam with SAC, as Colleen mentioned, on their website. If after the initial review we find there are deficiencies, and these could be in coursework, clinical practicum hours, good character, then your application will undergo a further review by CASLPO's registration committee. The committee meets quarterly on average, so your overall application time will increase by 3 to 6 months. And once the registration committee reviews your application, they may conclude there are no deficiencies and then direct the registrar to issue a certificate to the applicant. They may conclude that there are deficiencies and direct the registrar to issue a certificate of registration if the applicant successfully completes additional training or an exam, and that is specified by the panel. They may conclude that there are other concerns and direct the registrar to impose specific terms, conditions, and limitations on a certificate of registration for the applicant. Or they may conclude that registration must be denied and direct the registrar to refuse to issue a certificate of registration. Those are the 4 options available to the committee. Okay, so a note about the timelines. Following the Office of the Fairness Commissioner of Ontario, CASLPO is committed to processing applications as quickly as possible, and importantly, in the order that each application is received in a completed form. So the order is determined by when the complete application is received. So please resist the temptation. We will let you know at every step what's happening. So please resist the temptation to call the college and check on the status of your application, because that ends up slowing our processing for your application and for other applications. And we cannot change the order of the applications. And a final note about contact with us. For confidentiality reasons, we cannot speak to anyone other than the applicant about their application and without that applicant's permission. And this means that the college can't provide information about your application to your parent, your spouse, or your employer. So there's the reason of confidentiality, and there's also speaking to a third person. We often get misunderstood or distorted information by a parent or a spouse, and that can lead to delays and errors in your application. So for efficiency and privacy, we speak with you unless you give us written permission to speak to someone else. Okay, so a couple scenarios about the application process. Chu is concerned that her application package was not delivered properly. Should Chu contact the college to confirm the receipt of her application? Yes, no, maybe. And I think there we go. We've got a quick poll if you can give your votes. And then Jessica will let us know how we're doing. How are we doing, Jessica?
All right, so we have 30% say yes, 57% say no, and 13% say maybe.
Okay, so let's go. The answer is no. And this, as I say, we will keep you up to date and let you know what stage your application is from. So once we receive your application form, we're busy with the intake process, and we will let you know within a max of 15 days to let you know that we've received your application form and which documents we've received, and we'll let you know if any are outstanding. Within our timelines, we won't have any additional information to provide you, and extra calls about things like this will just slow us down, and we really want to have the fastest process we can have for all of our applicants. So outside, if we are past the timeline that we have given you, then by all means, please contact us and ask about things. But if we're within the timelines that are stated on our website or in our emails, please trust that we are doing our best, and we will get things to you as quickly as possible. Okay, another scenario. A potential employer for a different applicant, Olive, calls CASLPO to say, I would like to hire this graduating student for a position we have. We need her to start in 2 weeks, otherwise the children at the center will not get the service that they are entitled to. Is CASLPO able to move Olive's application ahead of the others? Yes, no, or maybe. All right, so provide your votes and we shall see what we get. Okay, how are we doing, Jessica?
All right, so we have 0% say yes, 97% say no, and 3% say maybe.
Amazing. So the answer, are we able to move Olive's application ahead of the others? The answer is no. We feel for hiring organizations who need staff and who have clients who need service, but we cannot move an application ahead of another. We must follow the Ontario Fairness Commissioner's requirement, and we must provide an impartial, transparent, and fair process for all of our applicants. If we were to advance Olive's file because there are children in that one center who wouldn't receive service, it's unfair to other people, maybe you, who submitted your applications earlier, and maybe the job you have also has patients who are waiting for service. So once we've confirmed in an email that the application is complete, it's placed in the queue, and we cannot deviate from that order for the impartial, transparent, and fair process that we must provide to everyone. Okay, so The message for our timeline is plan ahead. We have all of our timelines stated on our website. Please speak to any potential employers about the application timeline and the processes involved. It's not possible to expedite any applications. Okay, so that was talking about the application process, and then we have the registration process. So the registration process begins after the application process is successful, which is wonderful. And we have 4 categories of licenses: initial, general, academic, and non-practicing. I will give information about the general and initial licenses here because they're by far the most common. The general registration is for applicants who have met the academic requirements. They have provided at least 750 hours of patient care or related work in the 3 years prior to their registration date with CASLPO, and they have passed the CETP exam. So there are 3 requirements for a general certificate. An initial registration or initial certificate or initial license is for applicants who have met the academic requirements, but they may not have provided 750 hours of patient care or related work in the 3 years prior to being registered, and they may not have attempted the CETP exam. And if you get an initial license, then you must complete CASLPO's mentorship program, which Caitlin will talk all about, and it is a wonderful program that we are able to offer. A must offer too. So the timing of the CETP exam and registration. So it sounds a bit tricky, but if you are applying for a general license, you must successfully complete the CETP exam prior to your registration. If you are applying for an initial license, you have 2 options. You may successfully complete the CETP exam prior to your registration and then start your registration, or you may begin your registration with an initial certificate and then successfully complete the CETP exam during the 6-month term of your initial certificate. So you have that option with an initial license. If you fail the CETP exam during the term of your initial registration, your initial certificate will expire and you must pass the CETP exam before you reapply for registration with CASLPO. Okay, so the registration process with initial certificates. So this is slightly different for initial versus general. To complete the registration process, to become an initial registrant, you must have an offer of employment in Ontario to work as an audiologist or speech pathologist, and you must have an eligible mentor lined up for the mentorship program. So completing the registration, this section is much faster and than the application process. I will just let you know that. The completed registration form must be submitted, and you must submit the registration form, which will be given to you once you are told you're eligible for registration. You must submit the registration form. It must be received by CASLPO at least 10 days ahead of your proposed start date for work, because we need that time to get your registration completed. You must either have passed the CETP exam or a signed undertaking agreeing to complete the CETP exam in your initial period. Excuse me, I'm going to sneeze. So either you show that you've completed the CETP exam or you provide the signed undertaking. And the undertaking is simply an agreement that you will write the CETP exam during the 6-month term of your initial certificate of registration. Okay, you must provide confirmation of your employment start date. And this date refers to when you expect to begin working as an audiologist or speech pathologist in Ontario. If you don't know the date, it's okay to indicate pending completion of registration with CASLPO. You must confirm with us your practice location or practice locations and the confirmation of business telephone number. You must provide confirmation of eligibility to work in Canada. This can include a document providing proof of Canadian citizenship or permanent resident status or Canadian employment authorization, such as a work permit. And you must provide confirmation that you have professional liability insurance coverage. What we need is the carrier name, the policy certificate number, and the expiry date. And we require a minimum coverage of $2 million per claim. And payment of the remaining fees. We have the fee chart on our website. So you must pay the registration fee of $50 and a prorated annual fee payment. The annual fee, just for more information, is prorated quarterly for the registration year. And the registration year runs from October 1st to September 30th. So you would pay the full fee from October to December. You would pay a prorated fee from January to March, a different prorate, a less fee, smaller fee, and so on through the year. So all this information is on our fees chart, which is on the website. And then if you are getting an initial certificate, you need to submit a mentor's name and the name and email address of the human resources contact at each practice location. And if you're getting a general certificate, you must provide information about your employment history, declaration of practice recency, and a submission of completed employment verification forms. Okay, so once we've received the registration required documents, it may take up to 10 days in order for us to issue a certificate of registration to you. When your registration is complete, you receive your CASLPO number, which means that you are registered and you can use the title once you have your numbers. So, and once you receive your number, you will be visible on CASLPO's public register immediately. So if you look on our website at the top, you see Find a Registered Professional, and that is where you can access our database, the public register, and your name will appear on it once you get your CASLPO number. And then congratulations, because now that you have your CASLPO number, you may use the title, speech pathologist or audiologist, as the case may be, and you may begin working as an audiologist or speech pathologist in the province. And now that you're registered, there is one important reminder, one of the important reminders for all CASLPO registrants, and that is registration renewal. All CASLPO registrants are responsible for keeping their certificate of registration up to date. CASLPO certificates expire on September 30th every year. And so all CASLPO registrants must renew their certificate on or before October 1st every year. And this includes newly registered initial registrants. So if you become registered in July or August, you still need to renew your certificate by October 1st. And there we go. We're finished the section on application process and registration process. And maybe Colleen, here she is. We can take any questions if there are some, Jessica.
Oh, there are some. I've definitely been getting a lot of questions and I really appreciate them. I just want to let everyone know that if we're unable to answer your question in the webinar, or I'm unable to answer your question in the background, we will reach out to you via email very shortly to answer your question. So if it's not answered today, we will get you an answer. You can also at any time email international_grad@caslpo.com and ask your questions there. And yeah. So the first question I have is, if you are in Ontario as a hearing instrument specialist, but you have a previous audiology degree from your home country, do you have to show evidence of English proficiency? I'm going to add on to this question in order to apply to CASLPO. I'm going to give this question to Colleen, if she could answer it.
Yes, so the requirement for English proficiency is based on the program that you completed. So if the program that you completed was not in English or French, then you have to provide evidence of your language proficiency. So even if you have been working in Ontario, that would be the requirement. It is based on your degree and the language that the degree was obtained in.
And I will just specify the language of your professional master's degree.
Wonderful, thank you. This question is for Jennifer. Jennifer, would it be acceptable for the college, CASLPO, if we complete the WES process now and after a 6-month or 1-year gap, start the application with CASLPO?
So you're welcome to submit documents in any order at any time. So with the WES or with any academic credential assessment, you want to make sure that you have completed your master's degree completely. Otherwise, the WES will not show that you've completed a master's degree. So first of all, make sure that your WES is completed, or that your degree is completed before you try to get your academic credential assessment done. You can do it in any order. We do close files after a period of 2 years if everything hasn't been received by 2 years. I'm not sure the value of submitting a WES evaluation so early, because it doesn't take too long. They're quite quick, but it's up to you. Check the timelines and maybe speak with WES to find out how long it takes. And yeah.
Thank you, Jennifer. My next question is for Colleen, and that question is, I have written the praxis exam. Do I still need to write the CETP exam?
Yes, you do. Our requirement for a registration exam is specifically one that has been approved by our board of directors. And so CASLPO's board of directors has approved the Canadian Entry to Practice exam as our registration exam. So that's the only one that we do accept. And there are a couple of reasons for that. One is that the CETP exam is based on Canadian competencies, and also the CETP exam is one that is offered in both English and French, which we, as a province of Ontario, we must have an exam that's available in both official languages.
Thank you, Colleen. I have another question. I think that might be the last one we can take right now, but again, we have another question period, hopefully at the end of this session, and if we can't get to it, I promise we will respond to you. My last question is a two-parter, and it's, oh, I've lost it, hold on. It says, I'm gonna put this one to Jennifer. Hi, and thanks for your informative webinar. These are my questions. What is the difference between an academic type and an other certificate? And who gets the certificate? 2, what will happen if someone has a deficiency in coursework or clinical hours? Does the registration committee give them suggestions and help them to achieve them?
Right, okay. So the academic certificate can be obtained by people who've met all the academic requirements and who've done the CETP exam, and they must have a position at an academic institution, like they must be a professor or have some role at an academic institution. The second, I think that was it for the first one, Jessica?
Yeah, and the second one is if they're deficient in coursework or clinical hours, what can the registration committee help them with?
Right, so if you've completed a professional master's degree and you've met all the other requirements, but let's say you're missing a course, the committee gives you time to go and complete a course. And we at CASLPO can help you find a course that might be fitting, or you can take a course anywhere. Most people take courses online. that need to fulfill extra coursework, and we recommend highly that you check with us before you register and take a course to make sure that it will fulfill the requirements. But we certainly have conversations with people who do need to fill coursework requirements or clinical practicum requirements to make sure that you're doing the right thing and you don't waste your time and money.
Wonderful. So that's all the questions I have for right now, and we'll get to the rest at the end of the webinar.
Okay, Jennifer, could you advance the slide to the next one? All right. So we've gotten to the point of our 5-minute bio break. So we will give you until 1:15 to stretch and do whatever you need to do, and we'll be back. All right. So thank you so much.
So for the last section of our presentation today, I will be covering information on CASLPO's mentorship program, including the purpose and requirements of mentorship, an overview of the 6-month mentorship period, and a brief introduction to the mentorship self-assessment tool, or MSAT. We'll also go over some tips to facilitate a positive mentorship and the process for becoming a general registrant of the college after successfully completing mentorship. So finally, we'll review the answers to some frequently asked questions that we receive. So first, let's review the program. CASLPO's mentorship program has been in place since 1994 and serves 3 important purposes related to the college's role and mandate. First, mentorship is a condition of an initial certificate of registration. Initial registrants must successfully complete mentorship before they can become general registrants of the college. To protect the public, the college develops minimum practice standards that audiologists and speech-language pathologists in Ontario must meet. During mentorship, the mentor assesses the mentee's compliance with these minimum standards and ultimately decides whether to recommend mentees for a general certificate of registration based on understanding of and compliance with the college's standards. Lastly, the mentorship period serves as an introduction to the requirements of the Quality Assurance Program, which all general registrants must participate in annually. Mentorship provides initial registrants with the support of an experienced colleague to ensure that they have the knowledge, skill, and judgment to practice safely. As regulated healthcare professionals, mentees accept responsibility for their role in maintaining the public's confidence in the profession's ability to provide safe, quality, and ethical care by engaging in the career-long process of independent learning, self-reflection, and evaluation of their own competence. For anyone joining today from the United States, CASLPO's mentorship program is not the same as the clinical fellowship year required for ASHA certification. During mentorship, mentees must complete a minimum 6-month period of mentored practice, during which they need to provide at least 500 hours of patient care, receive at least 48 hours of guidance from their mentor, which can be direct or indirect, although some direct observation from your mentor is mandatory, and I'll describe more on that on the next slide. Mentored guidance should be spread over time and generally adhere to 2 hours per week, which equates to 24 hours in the first 3 months. The final requirement is to complete the MSAT. We often receive questions on how many hours mentees need to be directly observed. The college does not set a minimum requirement for direct observation, but rather this is at the discretion of your mentor. The amount of direct observation needs to be sufficient to evaluate how you're meeting the standards and will depend on your experience, skills, and confidence, the risk of harm associated with the clinical activities, and the practice environment. Please note that mentorship is not the same as supervision. During mentorship, you as a registrant of the college are accountable for your clinical work and decisions. So what does it mean to be accountable for your practice? It means that you're a professional who's expected and required to explain your actions and decisions. Professionalism is an attitude and personal philosophy demonstrated by a desire to always improve and learn, knowing your scope of practice and the limitations of your knowledge, leading when you're able, doing your best, maintaining professional boundaries, and always putting your patients first. Professionalism is also a set of behaviors, including being responsible, reliable, courteous, respectful, and accountable. So let's consider the following scenario to illustrate professionalism. Tanvi is an initial registrant who works as an independent contractor. Tanvi is told by a more experienced colleague that consent for assessment doesn't need to be documented in the patient health record. This is incorrect. Consent for assessment must be documented according to CASLPO regulations and standards and the Healthcare Consent Act. Regrettably, a complaint is filed to the college that involves Tanvi. During the investigation, patient records are reviewed and it is confirmed that consent for assessment was not documented. Tanvi is asked to explain why they didn't document the consent, and their explanation is, I was told by a more experienced colleague that this wasn't required, so I trusted them and didn't question it. I didn't want to create tension in the workplace by asking this question. I was new and didn't realize this was wrong. So is Tanvi's justification reasonable? And the answer is no. Being naive is not a defense. So to reiterate, being accountable for your practice means you are a professional who's expected and required to explain your actions and decisions. For example, doing things correctly and adhering to standards even when it's difficult or might upset an employer if you raise questions. So to that end, mentors are not accountable for decisions you make during the mentorship period. Mentors are not supervisors, and mentorship is not supervised practice. A mentor's role is to provide guidance and support to help you reflect on your practice and apply standards, improve your competence, apply principles of sound clinical reasoning, to provide you with feedback on how you're integrating standards in your practice, and to submit reports of your progress to the college. So after you are issued your CASLPO registration number, you will receive the mentorship program guidelines via email. We advise that you discuss the guidelines with a mentor who meets CASLPO's criteria, which are available on the website. You need to submit a mentorship contract to the college within 30 days of beginning your employment. You should discuss your start date with your mentor, which must be on or after the date you receive your CASLPO registration number, the process and requirements for mentorship, the logistics of meeting with your mentor, methods of evaluation and feedback, and identify a third party for conflict resolution. This slide provides a summary of the 6-month mentorship period. The first 3 months of mentorship focus on the professional practice standards and indicators. The midterm evaluation is done at the halfway point and includes a review of all the mentees' self-ratings on the practice indicators, evidence submissions, and comments. Based on this, the mentor provides their own final rating on how the mentee is meeting the indicators in each practice standard category. At the midterm, the mentor also reviews 5 of the mentee's patient records and discusses at least 2 clinical cases with the mentee using the clinical reasoning tool. Mentors consider these discussions to assign a midterm rating on the clinical reasoning practice indicator and are requested to comment on the clinical reasoning discussions in the midterm report. Based on the discussions of progress at the midterm, mentees then develop a minimum of 3 learning goals to target for the duration of the mentorship. In the second half of mentorship, mentees continue to evaluate how they're meeting the professional practice indicators, improve their awareness of applicable legislation and regulatory standards, and engage in independent learning to achieve the goals set at midterm. At the final evaluation, mentees review their MSAT, including comments and evidence of compliance if applicable for each practice indicator. The mentor will determine a final rating for all the indicators in each practice standard category and approves the learning goals based on a review of the activities the mentee completed. 5 additional patient records are reviewed at the final, and 2 additional cases are discussed using the clinical reasoning tool if the mentee received a rating of needs work to meet the clinical reasoning standard at the midterm. In the final mentor report, the mentor confirms the mentee completed 500 hours of patient care and received at least 48 hours of mentored guidance during the mentorship period, and indicates if they recommend the mentee for a general certificate of registration with CASLPO based on observation of their practice and evidence that they meet the practice standards of the college. You gain access to the MSAT when your mentorship contract is approved, and you and your mentor will use the MSAT to complete the activities listed on this slide. When you log into the MSAT, you will see important dates for your mentorship along the left-hand menu, the timelines for mentorship, as well as sections with resources and guidance documents for using the tool. Instructions are listed at the top of each MSAT section. This is where mentees will rate themselves on how they're meeting the standards, including their comments and uploaded evidence to support their evaluation. The mentor completes this section with their evaluation and comments. So what are the practice standards? They're minimum performance expectations of all audiologists and speech language pathologists practicing in Ontario in every practice setting. They're represented by the practice indicators listed in the MSAT, and they are also practice-specific standards documents, like the dysphagia standards for SLPs and provision of hearing aid services by audiologists. So while the term standard is applied to the indicators and documents interchangeably, the key point is that they all describe minimum practice expectations for the professions. So as discussed previously, mentees are evaluated on whether they're meeting 30 professional practice indicators across 5 categories, which are management practices, clinical practice, patient-centered practice, communication, and professional accountability. So the indicators listed on this slide under each category are examples and don't represent the comprehensive list. When you go into the MSAT, you'll see all the indicators, and we've also provided a handout with this information. We're going to discuss the indicators that are denoted in red on the next slide. There are 9 red flag standards in the MSAT that have been deemed to be higher risk if not met early in practice and are therefore prioritized at the midterm. There are also 21 non-red flag standards that are equally important, but more representative of areas of continuous improvement over the career span. The 9 red flag standards are record keeping, the controlled act of prescribing hearing aids, following health and safety procedures, obtaining informed consent, obtaining knowledgeable consent, maintaining patient confidentiality, clinical reasoning, accurately representing professional credentials, and professionalism. There's a particular emphasis on clinical reasoning during mentorship, and there are webinars about clinical reasoning available on the mentorship webpage. So now that we've completed an overview of the importance and requirements in mentorship, as well as how evaluations are completed in the MSAT, we'll provide some tips for ensuring a positive and beneficial mentorship experience. Approximately 250 initial registrants go through mentorship each year, and the vast majority do very well because we have very committed professions. Some of these suggestions are things you can do when you're searching for a job and things to think about as you begin your mentorship. So first, before you accept a job offer, take time to learn about the workplace or organization. Clarifying this information is important so that you have a better idea what to expect. Ask prospective employers what a typical workday looks like, whether there are experienced audiologists or SLPs on the team, what supports are available for new hires, and whether they have provided mentorship before. Your first job experience can have an important impact on the development of your career. You want to be in an environment where there's professionalism and you feel confident that appropriate practices are in place. The college regulates audiologists and speech language pathologists. It does not have the authority to regulate employers or facilities where the professions work. Although there may be SLPs or audiologists working for an organization, it's important to do your research to make sure they're reputable. We encourage you to use the public register to search for audiologists and speech-language pathologists. The public register can be accessed from our website. And all CASLPO registered audiologists and speech-language pathologists are listed on the public register. Ensure that you can meet standards of practice and your professional obligations. If you're coming from a different country, the standards for these areas may be different from where you were educated or where you worked before. During mentorship, you will be learning the standards, reflecting on how you meet them, and discussing this with your mentor. This happens in tandem with learning how to perform the expectations of your position. If you're coming to CASLPO and you won't do mentorship, you will still want to learn about the standards for your areas of practice. It's important to understand the process expected in your workplace for obtaining and documenting informed consent, and that they align with legislative and regulatory requirements. If applicable, make sure you understand the billing practices of the employer and that they adhere to the college's standards. Confirm that your information is only used for billing when you or someone you have supervised has provided the services, and that the billing system allows for an itemized invoice. Review the college's documents on record keeping and ensure that you understand the practices of the employing organization, including how clinical and financial records are stored and secured, and the procedures for release of information. Clarify whether you'll be responsible for supervising support personnel and that you understand your professional obligations by reviewing CASLPO's documents on supervision of support personnel. Make sure that the billing system allows for the name and job title of the support personnel on invoices. Ask the employer about their infection prevention and control measures and ensure that you meet the standards for infection prevention and control. Consider whether you will be an independent contractor or an employee. You can negotiate or seek professional advice on contracts or verbal agreements before signing an employment contract. Practice advisors are available to help registrants meet their professional obligations and can be contacted via the website listed on this slide. Be clear and honest about the support you will need to practice to the best of your ability. Difficulties happen when expectations are unclear. Indicate if you need further training or support in a particular area and seek clarification if you're uncertain about anything. Remember that completing your mentorship and demonstrating that you meet the standards of the profession is your responsibility. Make the most of your mentorship by seeking peer support from your mentor and other colleagues, and approach your work with professionalism. So now we'll go through what happens after you successfully complete mentorship. A general certificate of registration with CASLPO will be issued when you have successfully completed your mentorship, passed the CETP exam, and if applicable, fulfilled any outstanding orders issued by the registration committee, for example, any additional coursework. To maintain your general CASLPO registration, you must provide a minimum of 750 hours of patient care or related work in audiology or speech-language pathology during every 3-year period, which begins on the day that you're issued your general certificate. You will also need to meet the requirements of the Quality Assurance Program. So the last section of the presentation is to review some frequently asked questions from mentorship. So the first question is, can I start my mentorship before I write the Canadian Entry to Practice exam? And the answer is yes. You can obtain your initial certificate of registration with CASLPO and start your mentorship. If you start your mentorship before you pass the CETP exam, you'll be required to sign an undertaking to write the exam during the mentorship period. If you don't pass the exam during mentorship, you must stop practicing. Your mentorship will be interrupted and you must transfer your patients within 30 days. Your certificate of registration will expire and it will be reinstated when the college has confirmation that you passed the exam. You must inform your employer if this is your situation. So the next question, or further to this, how can I resume my mentorship after I pass the CETP exam? So a mentorship status form will be sent to you when CASLPO has learned that you failed the exam. When your registration with CASLPO has been reinstated after you pass the exam, staff will contact you about resuming mentorship. You may be able to pick up where you left off, but it will depend on a few factors, including evidence of your progress before the interruption and whether you remain with the same mentor and workplace. So decisions around how you resume mentorship are at CASLPO's discretion. The next question is, I work most of the time in a hospital, and that is where my mentor is. However, I have a part-time job at a private practice clinic. Can my hospital mentor provide mentorship for the work I do at the private practice, even if this work is quite different? The answer is yes, but there are some considerations. So the hospital mentor should be aware of the private practice where you're working. However, we advise you to have a collaborator in the other workplace. A collaborator in mentorship is an SLP or audiologist who meets the criteria for mentors and who will speak to your primary mentor about your practice and can provide some of the 48 hours of guidance required. So CASLPO has a single mentor requirement, and your primary mentor is still the one who retains responsibility for completing evaluation reports and submitting them in the MSAT. Information on CASLPO's single mentor requirement and collaborators is provided in the mentorship program guidelines and in the FAQs on our website. So the next question is, can I change mentors in the middle of my mentorship? So for example, if I have a change in my employment or my mentor goes on leave, etc. The answer is yes, it's possible to change mentors during your mentorship period. It's important to contact the college early if you realize that this will happen so that we can assist with the transition. To change mentors, you must submit a new mentorship contract, which will enable your MSAT to be updated with your new mentor's information once it's been confirmed that your new proposed mentor meets the criteria for mentoring. A written statement from your first mentor may be required depending on how far along you are in the mentorship period. I think this may be the last question, the last FAQ that we have, which is, I have not worked as many hours as I expected and will not have 250 hours or close to that by the midterm point of my mentorship. Will I be able to get an extension? So yes, you may request an extension to your mentorship if this happens. If you cannot complete mentorship within 6 months, you will need to fill out the mentorship extension request form, which is located in the MSAT under Mentee Resources. You will then email the completed form with an explanation for why the extension is indicated and send that to mentorship@caslpo.com at least 30 days before the due date. You'll receive confirmation whether your extension has been granted. CASLPO evaluates extension requests on an individual basis before they're approved. It's also important to note that CASLPO does not have the authority to grant extensions to the mentorship period beyond 24 months per the registration regulation. So if you have any questions about mentorship once you become registered with the college, please see CASLPO's mentorship webpage, which includes the mentorship program guidelines and the mentorship FAQs for comprehensive details on the requirements for mentorship. So that's the end of the content for our presentation. This slide includes resources for both the international graduate applications and mentorship, including both the web pages and the email contact information. If you have any questions, you can reach out to us directly by email. Okay, so I will turn it back over to Jessica to see if there are any more questions that have come in.
Oh my gosh, are there ever? Okay, so there's lots of questions. I want to start with some. I have a couple for mentorship, so I thought I would start with those since we're just finishing that part. The first mentorship question I have is, can I start practicing independently with an initial practice certificate? Hold on one second. So first off, this is for Caitlin. Can I start practicing independently with an initial practice certificate? I would still be meeting with the mentor often.
No, is the answer to that question. It is a condition of the initial certificate of registration that you practice under the guidance of a mentor who holds a general certificate of registration. So all your practice that you do with an initial certificate, you must be mentored.
Thank you, Caitlin. If I'm gonna give this one to Colleen. If we begin working in the US after graduation, how long do we need to work there in order to not need to take the CASLPO mentorship?
So in order to qualify for a general certificate, which does not require that you be mentored, you must have completed 750 hours within a 3-year period. So if you graduate and you're able to, however long it takes you to do 700 hours worth of patient care or related work in audiology or speech language pathology, at that point, once you have at least 750 hours, you can apply for the general certificate.
Thank you, Colleen. My next, oh, yep, Caitlin.
Oh, sorry, Jessica, I'm just going to interject. I would like to add an addendum to my answer because I'm wondering if this person was asking if they're able to engage in private practice.
That is how I interpreted the question.
Well, they hold an initial certificate. So yes, you cannot have independent private practice be your primary employment during mentorship. However, you can engage in a small amount of private practice on the side, but your mentor needs to be aware of the work that you're doing in private practice so that they're able to evaluate whether you're meeting the practice standards in that environment. So I apologize, both those things are true, but you can engage in private practice. Your mentor just needs to be aware and it not be your primary employment setting.
Thank you. My next question is for Jennifer. This question is, I am missing some audiology hours. Would you be able to redirect me to take some courses, or would that have to go to the registration committee?
You're on mute, Jennifer.
Pardon me. I assume you are an SLP applicant who is missing, I assume, some coursework hours in audiology. So if you apply and there is any deficiency in your application, it must be forwarded to the registration committee. So if you are able to complete coursework before applying for the before you apply to CASLPO, and you have a transcript showing that you've completed a course in audiology after your master's maybe, but before you apply, if you have met the requirements, then you would not need to go, your application would not need to go to the registration committee. I don't know, I think that answers the question.
Yes.
Okay, and can I just make an addendum to the previous question given to Colleen? I went through the mentorship program years ago, and I would say it is not something to be avoided necessarily. It is a wonderful program where your mentor guides you through the practice standards and gets you into practice in Ontario. You learn about the systems. I will just give a plug for the mentorship program. It is wonderful.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Jennifer. Hold on one second. Work eligibility. Okay, so this is for Colleen. Do we need to show work eligibility in the application process or only during the registration process towards the end?
Well, At the registration stage, that's where you choose between going forward as an initial applicant versus a general applicant. So part of the application process does ask a few preliminary questions that will give us maybe a bit of idea of which category you're going to be leaning in, but the evidence doesn't get provided until you are in that registration phase.
Thanks, Colleen. My next question is for Colleen again. Can a speech language pathologist that's not from Canada work as a communicative disorders assistant?
So CASLPO does not regulate communicative disorders assistants, nor does any other regulator. It's an unregulated profession, and therefore, as an unregulated profession, you are more than welcome to apply to any positions associated with that particular title. It would be the employer who would decide whether or not you are qualified for that position.
Thanks. Sorry, I'm still getting questions in and then it's bumping. So this question is, again, for Colleen. It's the 750 hour of clinical hours in the past 3 years. Oh yeah, I think you just answered this question, but is the 750 hours of clinical hours in the past 3 years calculated from the date of submitting the application? But you just answered this question and it pertains mostly to at the time you're becoming registered. You must have 750 hours within that time.
Correct.
Thank you. Give me one more moment, please. I'm loving all the questions. I think this is the most questions we've ever gotten in an international webinar, so this is great. 1 second. Okay, so this is another, I'm gonna put this question for Jennifer. If an SLP MSc program does not cover enough audiology hours, can you still proceed with the registration if you have enrolled in an accredited course, or does the audiology course have to be completed in order to proceed? And they're speaking, of course, of the minor hours.
Right. Okay. So for a speech pathology applicant who's missing minor coursework hours, in order to be counted as complete, we must receive the transcript showing the completion of the audiology course. If you submit your application and you tell us that you're in the middle of the audiology course, it's still a deficiency at that point. So yeah. I mean, if you haven't taken it yet, but you plan to, I think you may as well still submit your application, because the course will probably take longer than the registration committee process. But the timing's up to you. But if when you submit the application, you haven't completed all the coursework, then that's a deficiency. So the committee would need to review your application.
Wonderful. This question says, hello again, thank you for all the relevant information. I would like to know if there is specifically a required timeline between the approval to proceed from CASLPO and taking the CETP exam. The way I interpret this question is there a timeline in which they need to complete the CETP exam? I'll direct this question to Colleen.
Well, I guess what we would say is your application is active for 2 years. So if you want to become registered and not have to reapply, you should, if you're going to go for a general certificate, you should definitely take that exam within 2 years of you submitting that application. If you are applying for an initial certificate, then the exam must be taken within that 6-month period of the initial certificate. So within that first 6 months of your initial certificate, you would have to take the exam that's available during that period. So I hope that answers the question.
Thanks so much, Colleen. The next question I will direct to Jennifer. Jennifer, if you already did your WES academic credential evaluation and they determined your audiology degree as a 1-year postgraduate diploma, are you still able to apply to CASLPO?
So there's 2 scenarios. One, if it is not a master's degree, then you can't apply for registration. You won't meet the requirements if it's not a master's degree, equivalent of a Canadian master's degree, which is what WES will tell us. So if it is just a 1-year diploma that you've completed, then no, you would not be eligible. If sometimes this happens, people submit their degrees early to WES, and so WES doesn't see the full degree completed, and maybe that's why they've said it's equivalent to 1 year of postgraduate training or something like that. Then I would say resubmit once you've completed the degree, completed the program, and see if it becomes deemed eligible to or equivalent to a Canadian master's degree. So if that's the case. And the odd time, very rare, but it does happen, WES can determine that it's not a master's degree when maybe you think it really is. In that case, you can try submitting your degree. If you do think it really is equivalent to a Canadian master's, you can submit your degree to be evaluated by another academic credential assessor.
Amazing. Thank you, Jennifer. My next question is for you as well. This question is, if somebody already, oh, wait, hold on. Oh, no, that was the one, sorry. Hold on. Somebody already has Western USA. Yeah. Okay, sorry. I'm just still going through this. Okay, here's one for you. This is also for Jennifer. Can I use my CFY hours towards my professional experience as an SLP?
So yes, if during those CFY hours you were hired as a speech pathologist or audiologist. If your CFY hours were done as a student or not a full speech pathologist or audiologist, then they may not be counted. So essentially, to count the 750 hours, those have to be hours where you are hired as a speech pathologist or audiologist.
Thank you. My next question is for Colleen. Colleen, to submit my application form and other documents, do I need my PR status before I can submit my application, or is that something that we wait until registration at?
Yes, so you can begin the application process before your immigration status has been completed, and submit your PR document at the registration stage. So that's something that you can definitely do.
And I'll just add, if you're planning to do that, just in reminding what Colleen said about the 2-year application being open period. Those are not a sentence, but your application's held open for 2 years. So if you think you will get your PR documentation within 2 years, then go for it. If you think it's going to take longer than 2 years, then you might want to hold off on submitting your application.
Amazing. Thank you, Jennifer and Colleen. My next question is, I am an SLP with work experience of 3+ years in India. Will I require mentorship, or can I directly go for general license?
Yes, so you can apply for a general certificate as long as you have that 750 hours over the past 3-year period. So it would be an option for you.
Okay.
Jennifer?
I will just add one more point. The professional experience must come after completion of your professional master's degree. So you have to have that 750 hours after the master's degree before you become registered.
Okay. This question's for Colleen. Colleen, is the 750 hours requirement to be mandatory met in Canada, or can any other foreign country would it be fine to get those hours?
Yes, so the 750 hours may be obtained outside of Canada. So definitely wherever you obtain that experience, as long as you can provide us with evidence of that professional experience, we will accept it.
Thanks, Colleen. Caitlin, I have another question for you. This one is, I have obtained my CCCs from the US, and hold on one second, it just got bumped. And the part of the mentorship hours were completed by an SLP license with ASHA and CASLPO. Will I be able to use those hours for the mentorship hours if I'm registering as an initial practice certificate?
So, no, you can only start counting hours in mentorship once you've received your CASLPO registration number, and that has to be with Ontario patients. So patients in Ontario, only work done with them can be counted toward the 500 hours of patient care required in mentorship.
Wonderful. My next question is for Jennifer. Jennifer, I don't know. I don't think I asked you this one yet, but if I did, I'm sorry. If I have more than 135 hours for section 1 in the coursework requirements form, should I put all the courses I have for that section, or do you only want those totaling 135 hours exactly?
Good question. So if you've completed 1,000 hours, we don't need to know everything. Essentially, we want to know that you've completed 135 hours, and maybe in case you're mistaken and one of the courses won't fit in, throw in some extra courses, just so there's a buffer. But we don't need to see all the courses. If you have 15 courses that fit into that section, then we probably don't need to know all of them, but just give us enough that in case one course actually doesn't belong there, that it's easy for us to find things. We will go through it and make any adjustments that need to be done, so, but just give us a few extra.
I'm going to give you guys a break for this one. I'm going to answer this question, but what document format would you require to show the 750 hours? I have over 7 years of work experience in India as a speech therapist. So as long as you have those hours and they happened after your professional master's program, once you've been deemed eligible for registration and you've successfully completed your CETP exam, you will be sent a form that's called the verification of employment form, and you would send this to your past employer that they could say that you have completed at least 750 hours within the last 3 years. This form is only sent to you once if you are registering as a general registrant, and it is only sent to you again when you've been deemed eligible for registration with CASLPO and you've completed your CTP exam successfully. I think I have time for one more question, and I'm going to pick one more. Sorry. One second. Oh, this one's for Jennifer. Is a course in psychology mandatory for audiology pathway? So when you're applying to be an audiologist.
So all applicants, speech or audiology, do need to complete one course, minimum of one course in the area of human development, which is often a psychology course.
Okay, we only have 1 minute left, so I would say, Colleen, if you want to take over again?
Yes, if someone can advance the slide to the last one, and I would just say thank you everyone for attending our webinar. I will remind you that in a few weeks we will provide a copy of this webinar video on our website, as well as a copy of the slides. So any of your friends who weren't able to attend, if you can let them know, we'll be sending out an email reminder when the slides are available to everyone that registered for the webinar as well. So thank you so much, and have a good day. Bye now.